The stagecoach rattled into Coloma, California on a dusty September afternoon in 1872, carrying a woman whose eyes held more sorrow than anyone her age should know. Nora Hampton clutched her worn leather satchel against her chest as the wheels ground to a halt outside the general store, each breath she took feeling like broken glass scraping against her ribs. She had been running for 3 weeks straight, and the bruises on her arms beneath her long sleeves were finally turning from purple to yellow, though the ones on her soul remained fresh and raw. The driver helped her down, his weathered face creasing with concern as he noticed how she flinched at his touch. She forced a smile that did not reach her eyes and thanked him quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the small mining town, though most of the gold seekers had moved on to richer claims years ago, leaving behind a skeleton of what had once been a booming settlement during the rush of '49. Nora stood on the wooden boardwalk, her brown traveling dress coated with the dust of hundreds of miles. She was 22 years old, though she felt ancient. Her auburn hair, once glossy and carefully maintained, hung in a loose braid down her back, and her green eyes swept the street with the wariness of a hunted deer. She needed work, shelter, and most of all, she needed to disappear. The general store seemed as good a place as any to start asking questions. She pushed open the door, and a small bell chimed above her head. The proprietor, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and flour on her apron, looked up from arranging canned goods on a shelf. "Good afternoon, dear. You look like you have been traveling a long spell," the woman said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I am Mrs. Pritchard. Can I help you with something?" Nora approached the counter, her fingers trembling slightly as she set down her satchel. "I am looking for work, any kind of work. I can cook, clean, tend to children. I do not need much, just room and board and enough to get by." Mrs. Pritchard studied her for a long moment, and Nora felt exposed under that knowing gaze, as though the older woman could see every secret she was carrying. "You running from something, honey?" The question hung in the air between them. Nora swallowed hard, fighting the urge to lie. "Someone," she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. "My husband, former husband, I should say. He is not a good man." Understanding flooded Mrs. Pritchard's face, and she nodded slowly. "Well, you came to the right place if you are looking to start fresh. Coloma's not what it used to be, but folks here mind their own business and take care of their own. Let me think." She tapped her finger against her chin thoughtfully. "The schoolteacher position was just filled last month and the hotel has a full staff, but there might be something out at the Dalton Ranch." "The Dalton Ranch," Nora repeated, "about 5 miles west of town. Owen Dalton runs it, has for the past 10 years since his father passed. Good man, fair employer. His housekeeper, old Martha, passed away this spring, and far as I know, he has been managing on his own since then. With Roundup coming and him running that whole operation, I imagine he could use the help. He comes into town for supplies every Saturday. That is tomorrow. You could talk to him then, or I could give you directions if you wanted to head out there today." Nora felt a flutter of hope in her chest, fragile as a butterfly's wing. "I would rather not wait if that is all right. Could you give me the directions, Mrs.?" Pritchard wrote out careful instructions on a piece of brown paper, then added, "You look half-starved, child. Let me pack you something to eat for the walk." Despite Nora's protests, the kind woman wrapped up some bread, cheese, and dried apples in a cloth. No arguments. Consider it a welcome to Coloma. Tears pricked at Nora's eyes, the first real kindness she had experienced in longer than she could remember, threatening to crack the carefully constructed walls she had built around her heart. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. The walk to the Dalton ranch took her nearly 2 hours in the late afternoon heat. The road wound through golden hills dotted with oak trees, and in the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose like ancient sentinels. Despite her exhaustion, Nora found herself breathing a little easier with each step away from town, away from the stage routes, away from the possibility of being found. The ranch came into view as she crested a hill, and she stopped to take it in. The main house was a solid 2-story structure built from timber and stone, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, a bunkhouse, and what looked like a smokehouse. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could see several men working with horses in a corral near the barn. Nora straightened her dress as best she could and approached the main house, her heart hammering against her ribs. Before she could knock, the front door opened and a man stepped out onto the porch, stopping short when he saw her. Owen Dalton was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar of his work shirt, and his face was tanned and weathered from countless hours in the sun. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, a deep brown that held a warmth and steadiness that made something in her chest ache. He looked to be in his late 20s, and there was dried sweat on his brow and dust on his clothes that suggested he had been working all day. "Can I help you, madam?" His voice was deep and rough, but not unkind. Nora clutched her satchel tighter. "I am sorry to arrive unannounced, Mrs. Pritchard in town suggested I come speak with you. I am looking for work, and she mentioned you might need a housekeeper." Owen's eyebrows rose slightly, and he stepped down from the porch, though he maintained a respectful distance. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the calluses on his hands, the way he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "You walked all the way from town?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "That is a fair distance in this heat. Please, come sit down. Can I get you some water?" His immediate concern for her welfare, with no questions asked, no demands made, caused that fragile thing in her chest to flutter again. She followed him to the porch, where he gestured to a rocking chair before disappearing inside. He returned moments later with a tin cup full of cool water, which she accepted gratefully. "Thank you," she said after taking a long drink. "I am Nora Hampton." "Owen Dalton," he replied, leaning against the porch railing and studying her with those steady brown eyes. "Martha Pritchard sent you, you said?" "Yes, sir. She mentioned your housekeeper had passed and thought you might need help." Owen was quiet for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. "I will be honest with you, Miss Hampton. The work is hard. I run this ranch with a crew of 6 men, and during roundup and branding, we can have up to a dozen here. That means cooking for hungry cowboys 3 times a day, keeping the house in order, managing supplies, and doing laundry. The hours are long, and it is not glamorous." "I am not looking for glamorous," Nora said quietly. "I am looking for honest work and a place to stay. I am a hard worker, Mr. Dalton, and I do not shy away from difficult tasks." He studied her for another long moment, and she forced herself to meet his gaze even though every instinct told her to look away, to make herself small and unnoticed. She saw the exact moment he noticed the fading bruise on her wrist where her sleeve had shifted, saw his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "The job comes with room and board," he said finally. "There is a small room off the kitchen that was Martha's, $30 a month on top of that. Sundays off, except for preparing breakfast before church. I will not pry into your business, Miss Hampton, and I expect the same courtesy. But I run a respectable operation here, and I expect honest work for honest pay. Does that sound agreeable to you?" Relief washed over Nora so powerfully she felt lightheaded. "More than agreeable, Mr. Dalton. Thank you. When would you like me to start? Seeing as it is nearly supper time and I was about to burn something over the stove, how about right now?" A hint of a smile played at the corner of his mouth, transforming his serious face into something unexpectedly handsome. Nora stood, squaring her shoulders. "Show me to the kitchen." The interior of the house was rustic but well built, with solid furniture and windows that let in the golden afternoon light. The kitchen was spacious, with a large cast iron stove, a deep sink with a pump, and shelves lined with supplies. Owen showed her to the small bedroom off the kitchen, which contained a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window overlooking the vegetable garden. "It is not much," Owen said, standing in the doorway. "It is perfect," Nora said honestly, setting her satchel on the bed. It was hers, a space that was safe, and that was more than she had dared hope for. That first evening she prepared a simple supper of fried potatoes, beans, and the beef that Owen had already started cooking. He had protested that she should rest first, but she insisted, needing the familiarity of work to ground herself in this new reality. When she rang the dinner bell, 6 cowboys filed into the dining room, their conversations dying as they noticed her. Owen made brief introductions. The men were polite, removing their hats and nodding respectfully, though their curiosity was evident. Throughout the meal, Nora kept her eyes down, focusing on serving and clearing dishes, old habits from her marriage making her want to be invisible. After the men had returned to the bunkhouse, and Owen had retired to his study to go over the ranch accounts, Nora stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes and watching the sun set over the distant mountains. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar task, but her mind was racing. She was safe, at least for now. She had work, a roof over her head, and an employer who seemed decent, but the fear had not left her. It lived in her chest like a cold stone, whispering that James would find her, that he always found her, that she could never truly escape. Her hands trembled as she dried the last plate, and she gripped the edge of the counter, breathing slowly through her nose. "Miss Hampton." She jumped, spinning around to find Owen standing in the kitchen doorway, concern etched on his face. "I am sorry, I did not mean to startle you. I wanted to thank you for supper. The men said it was the best meal they had in months, and I am inclined to agree." Nora forced her breathing to steady. "You are welcome. It was nothing special. It was warm and edible, which is more than I can usually manage." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I also wanted to say you are safe here. I do not know what you are running from, but this is a good place with good people. You do not need to be afraid." The kindness in his voice, the genuine concern in his eyes, it was too much. The walls she had built so carefully began to crack. "I am broken inside," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. She pressed her hand to her mouth, horrified at her own vulnerability. Owen was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle but firm. "Then let me help put you back together." The tears she had been holding back for weeks finally spilled over, and she turned away, ashamed of her weakness. She heard him move closer, but he did not touch her, respecting her space. "I am sorry," she managed through her tears. "You must think I am foolish." "I think you are brave," Owen said quietly. "It takes courage to run, it takes even more to start over." She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, still not facing him. "You do not know me, you do not know what I have done. I know you walked 5 miles in the heat to ask for work. I know you started cooking dinner when you should have been resting. I know you flinched when I came into the room, which tells me someone taught you to be afraid. That is enough for me to know you deserve kindness, not judgment." Nora finally turned to face him, studying this man who was offering her something she had almost forgotten existed: compassion without condition. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Owen was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. "My mother used to say that everyone is fighting a battle we know nothing about. The least we can do is be kind. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "you make much better biscuits than I do, so it is in my best interest to make sure you stay." Despite herself, Nora felt a small laugh escape, watery and brief but real. It felt strange, using those muscles, but not unwelcome. "Get some rest, Miss Hampton. Tomorrow will be a long day." Owen nodded respectfully and left the kitchen, his boots echoing on the wooden floors. Nora finished tidying the kitchen and retreated to her small room. She lay on the narrow bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in 3 weeks, she felt the tight knot of fear in her chest loosen just slightly. She was not naive enough to think she was truly safe, but maybe, just maybe, she had found a place to catch her breath. The next morning, Nora woke before dawn, her internal clock still set to the brutal schedule her husband had demanded. She dressed quickly, braided her hair, and started the kitchen fire to make coffee and breakfast. By the time Owen appeared, she had biscuits in the oven and was frying eggs and bacon. "You did not have to start so early," Owen said, pouring himself coffee from the pot she had prepared. "Old habits," Nora replied, focusing on the stove. "Besides, ranch work starts early. The men will need a good breakfast." They fell into an easy routine over the following weeks. Nora woke early, prepared 3 substantial meals a day, managed the household, and maintained the vegetable garden. The work was hard, but it was honest, and no one raised a hand to her or spoke cruel words. The cowboys were respectful. Owen was unfailingly kind, and slowly, very slowly, Nora began to breathe a little easier. She learned the rhythms of the ranch, the way the men worked from sunup to sundown during roundup, the careful management of the cattle, the endless maintenance required to keep everything running. Owen was a good boss, firm but fair, and she saw the respect his men had for him in the way they worked and the way they spoke to him. For his part, Owen found himself looking forward to meals in a way he had not in months. It was not just the food, though Nora's cooking was exceptional. It was the small touches she brought to the house: fresh flowers on the table, curtains she mended and washed until they were bright again, the way the entire place seemed warmer somehow with her presence. But he also noticed her caution, the way she still flinched at sudden movements, how she kept her distance from the men, the sadness that lingered in her eyes even when she smiled. He found himself wanting to know her story, but more than that, he found himself wanting to see that sadness fade. One evening in early October, after the men had finished supper and returned to the bunkhouse, Owen found Nora on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He approached slowly, making sure she heard him coming. "Beautiful evening," he said, leaning against the porch railing a respectful distance away. "It is," Nora agreed softly. "I have never seen sunsets like the ones here. In Boston, you could barely see the sky between the buildings. You are from Boston?" Owen asked, filing away this small piece of information. Nora nodded. "Born and raised. My father was a clerk, my mother a seamstress. They both passed from fever when I was 18. She paused, her fingers gripping the porch railing. "I married James 6 months later. I thought he was kind. I thought he would take care of me." Owen stayed quiet, sensing she needed to speak to let these words out. "He was kind at first, charming even, but after the wedding he changed. Or maybe I just finally saw who he really was." Her voice was steady, but Owen could hear the pain beneath it. "He did not like me speaking to other people. He did not like me leaving the house without his permission. He did not like me having opinions that differed from his, and when I did those things anyway, he found ways to correct me. "He hurt you," Owen said quietly, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "Often," Nora confirmed, still staring at the sunset. "But the physical pain was not the worst part. It was the way he made me doubt myself, made me feel worthless, made me believe I deserved it. He was very good at that." "You did not deserve it," Owen said firmly. "No one deserves that. I know that now, or at least I am trying to know it." She finally looked at him, her green eyes bright with unshed tears. "3 months ago, he went too far. He broke my arm. When the doctor came, I told him I had fallen down the stairs. But the doctor, he knew. He looked at me and said, 'Next time you might not survive.' Those words, they woke something in me, so I started planning. I took small amounts of money from the household account whenever I could. I packed a bag and hid it, and one day when James went to his club, I left." "That took incredible courage," Owen said. Nora shook her head. "It took desperation. I went to New York first, then Philadelphia, then West. I kept thinking I saw him everywhere, that he had found me. I am still waiting for him to appear, to drag me back." Owen moved a little closer, close enough that she could see the intensity in his eyes. "If he comes here, he will have to go through me first. And I promise you, Nora, that is not a fight he would win." The use of her first name, the fierce protectiveness in his voice, it made something warm bloom in her chest. "You barely know me," she whispered. "I know enough," Owen replied. "I know you work harder than anyone I have ever met. I know you have been kind to every person on this ranch. I know you hum while you cook, even when you think no one is listening. I know you saved a baby bird that fell from its nest and nursed it back to health. I know you are strong and brave and deserving of every good thing this world has to offer." Nora felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such simple honesty, such uncomplicated respect. "Owen," she said, testing his name on her lips for the first time. "Yes, thank you for everything. For giving me this job, for giving me safety, for giving me a chance to remember who I am." "You do not have to thank me for basic decency," Owen said gently. "But you are welcome all the same." They stood together in the fading light, not touching but sharing the space, and Nora felt something shift inside her. The broken pieces were still there, but maybe, just maybe, they were beginning to fit back together in a new configuration. As autumn deepened, the relationship between Nora and Owen shifted in subtle ways. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. She learned that his mother had died when he was 12, that his father had been a hard man who showed love through teaching rather than affection, that Owen had built this ranch into something prosperous through sheer determination and endless work. He learned that she loved reading but had been forbidden books by her husband, that she had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, that her favorite color was the deep blue of the sky just after sunset. He started bringing her books from town, watching her face light up with joy as she ran her fingers over the covers like they were precious treasures. They fell into a comfortable routine, often sitting together in the evenings after the work was done, him reviewing accounts while she mended clothes or read. The silence between them was comfortable, companionable, and Nora found herself looking forward to these quiet moments more than she wanted to admit. November brought the first real cold, and with it, preparations for winter. Nora helped process and preserve the last of the garden vegetables, working alongside Owen to ensure they had enough supplies to last through the harsh Sierra Nevada winter. They worked side by side in the kitchen, shoulders occasionally brushing, and Nora found she no longer flinched at his proximity. One snowy afternoon, while they were both in the kitchen preparing preserves, their hands touched as they reached for the same jar. The contact was brief, Barely a moment, but Nora felt it like a spark of electricity. She looked up to find Owen watching her, something warm and questioning in his eyes. "I am sorry," he said, pulling his hand back. "Do not be," Nora replied softly, surprising herself with her boldness. Her heart was racing, but not with fear. This was different, this feeling that made her skin tingle and her breath quicken. This was hope, and attraction, and the terrifying possibility of something more. Owen's hand slowly returned, his fingers gently covering hers on the jar. "Nora," he said quietly, "I do not want to push you or make you uncomfortable, but I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond employer and employee. You have become important to me, very important." Nora felt tears prick her eyes, but these were different than the ones she had shed before. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I am afraid of trusting again, of believing in goodness again. James, he broke something in me that I do not know can be fixed." "You are not broken," Owen said firmly, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "You are wounded, and that is different. Wounds can heal given time and care." "What if I cannot be what you need?" The question came out small and vulnerable. "You already are," Owen replied simply. "You are kind, strong, intelligent, and beautiful. You make me laugh. You make this house a home. You make me want to be a better man. That is more than enough." "I do not know how to do this," Nora whispered. "I do not know how to trust, how to love without fear." Owen's free hand came up slowly, telegraphing his movement, giving her every chance to pull away. When she did not, he gently cupped her cheek. "Then let me help you learn. No pressure, no expectations, just you and me, taking it one day at a time." Nora leaned into his touch, her eyes closing as she felt the warmth of his palm against her skin. "One day at a time," she repeated. "One day at a time," Owen confirmed. Their courtship, if it could be called that, was gentle and patient. Owen never pushed, never demanded. He asked permission before taking her hand, before putting his arm around her shoulders when they sat on the porch in the evenings. He told her she was beautiful, but also that she was clever, capable, strong. Nora bloomed under his attention like a flower that had been kept too long in the dark. She laughed more freely, smiled more often. The shadows in her eyes began to recede, replaced by a cautious but growing joy. Christmas came, and Nora decorated the house with pine boughs and berries, baked special treats for the men, and felt something she had not experienced in years: happiness. Owen gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of pencils. "For your thoughts," he said as she unwrapped it on Christmas morning, just the two of them in the kitchen before the rest of the ranch woke. "Or stories, or anything else you want to put in it. Your words, your voice, unfiltered and free." Nora threw her arms around him, surprising them both. He held her carefully, reverently, as though she was something precious and fragile. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder, "for everything, for seeing me." "Always," Owen promised, his arms tightening slightly around her. She pulled back just enough to look up at him, and the tender expression on his face made her heart skip. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, he leaned down. Their lips met in the gentlest of kisses, barely more than a whisper of contact, but it sent warmth flooding through Nora's entire body. When they parted, Owen searched her face carefully. "Was that all right?" Nora nodded, too overcome to speak. It had been more than all right. It had been perfect, everything a kiss should be. Tender, respectful, full of promise and possibility. The winter passed in a blur of snowstorms and cold nights, of shared warmth and growing intimacy. Owen taught Nora to ride, patient with her nervousness, steady when she wobbled. They rode out together on clear days, exploring the ranch, and he showed her his favorite places. The meadow where wildflowers would bloom in spring, the creek where he used to fish as a boy. the hilltop where you could see for miles in every direction. In February, on a crystalline day when the snow sparkled like diamonds under a brilliant blue sky, Owen took Nora to that hilltop. They sat on a fallen log, looking out over the valley, their breath pluming in the cold air. "I have been thinking," Owen said, taking her hand in his, "about the future, about what I want my life to look like." Nora's heart began to race. "Oh, I want it to look like this," he said, gesturing to the vista before them. "This land, this life. But more than that, I want you in it. Not as my housekeeper, but as my partner, my wife, if you will have me." Nora felt tears spring to her eyes. "Owen, I am still married. Legally, I mean. I never divorced James because I did not know how, and I was afraid he would find me if I tried." "We will figure that out," Owen said firmly. "There are lawyers who can help, ways to do it that will keep you safe. It might take time, but I am willing to wait as long as necessary. I just need to know if you feel the same way I do." "I do," Nora said, the words coming easier than she had expected. "I love you, Owen. I did not think I could ever feel this way again, but you have shown me what love is supposed to be. Patient, kind, respectful. You have helped me find myself again, helped me remember that I am worth something." Owen pulled her close, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips. "You are worth everything," he murmured against her mouth. "And I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you let me." "I let you," Nora whispered back and kissed him again. True to his word, Owen contacted a lawyer in Sacramento. The process of securing a divorce was complicated, especially since Nora needed to do it without James discovering her location until it was finalized. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Mrs. Cunningham, who had helped other women in similar situations, explained that California law allowed for divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty. "We will need documentation," Mrs. Cunningham said during her visit to the ranch in March. "Medical records if possible, witness statements if you have them." Nora provided the name of the doctor in Boston who had treated her broken arm, who had looked at her with such knowing sadness. She wrote out detailed accounts of the abuse, her hands shaking as she recalled each incident. Owen sat with her through it all, holding her when she cried, reminding her that she was safe now. The legal process took months. Papers had to be filed, notices published in Boston newspapers to satisfy legal requirements, responses waited for. During this time, Nora lived in a state of anxious anticipation, terrified that James would contest the divorce, that he would come looking for her. But as spring turned to summer with no sign of him, she began to relax. She learned later through Mrs. Cunningham that James had been too proud to contest. The public airing of his abuse, the legal documentation of his cruelty, it would have ruined his reputation in Boston society. So he let her go, probably thinking himself well rid of a troublesome wife. In late August of 1873, nearly a year after Nora had first arrived in Coloma, the final divorce decree arrived. She held the paper in her trembling hands, staring at the words that officially ended her marriage, that legally freed her from the man who had haunted her nightmares. "It is over," she whispered, looking up at Owen with wide eyes. "It is really over." Owen swept her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen as she laughed and cried simultaneously. "You are free," he said, setting her down but keeping his arms around her. "Truly free. So what happens now?" Nora asked, her hands resting on his chest. Owen smiled, that slow, warm smile that never failed to make her heart skip. "Now I ask you properly. Nora Hampton, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Nora said without hesitation. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married in early September, exactly 1 year after Nora had arrived in Coloma. It was a small ceremony at the local church, with Mrs. Pritchard as her attendant and Owen's foreman standing up for him. The cowboys from the ranch filled the pews, along with various townspeople who had become friends over the past year. Nora wore a simple dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Pritchard had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair. As she walked down the aisle and saw Owen waiting for her, his eyes bright with love and promise, she felt the last of her broken pieces settle into place. She was not the same person she had been when she fled Boston. She was stronger now, more whole, forged in fire and remade through love. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but when Owen promised to love, honor, and cherish her, she knew he meant every word. And when she promised the same, she felt the truth of it in her bones. Their first night as husband and wife, Owen carried her over the threshold of the ranch house, now truly their home together. He was patient and gentle, letting her set the pace, and when they came together, it was with a tenderness that made her weep with joy. This was what love was supposed to feel like, she realized. Safe, cherishing, mutual. "Are you all right?" Owen asked, brushing tears from her cheeks as they lay tangled together afterwards. "I am perfect," Nora replied honestly. "For the first time in my life, I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Life as Owen's wife brought new challenges and joys. She was no longer just the housekeeper but the lady of the ranch, a partner in the enterprise. Owen consulted her on decisions, valued her opinions, treated her as an equal. Together they made plans for the future, for expanding the herd, for improving the property. But it was in the small moments that Nora found the most joy. Waking up in Owen's arms, safe and warm. Working side by side in the garden, their hands dirty and their laughter free. Sitting on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing. In the spring of 1874, Nora discovered she was pregnant. She was terrified at first, memories of James's cruelty making her fear what motherhood might bring. But Owen's joy was so pure, his excitement so genuine, that her fear gradually transformed into anticipation. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating, his hand gently resting on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Are you hoping for a boy or a girl?" Nora asked one evening as they sat together. "I am hoping for healthy," Owen replied. "Though if it is a girl, I hope she has your courage, and if it is a boy, I hope he has your kindness." "I hope they have your steadiness," Nora said softly. "Your good heart." The pregnancy was not easy. Nora was sick for the first few months, and the summer heat made her swell and ache. But Owen was attentive without being overbearing, helping where he could and hiring a woman from town to assist with the heavier housework. In late October, as the leaves were turning gold and the air was crisp with the promise of winter, Nora went into labor. The local midwife, Mrs. Chen, a Chinese woman who had stayed in Coloma after her husband had worked the mines, attended her. Owen paced outside the bedroom, listening to Nora's cries and feeling helpless. After nearly 12 hours of labor, a baby's cry pierced the air. Mrs. Chen emerged, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Dalton. A healthy, strong boy." Owen rushed into the room to find Nora propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. "Owen," she said softly, "meet your son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the red, wrinkled face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving one tiny fist in the air. Owen felt something crack open in his chest, a love so fierce and immediate it took his breath away. "He is perfect," Owen whispered, gently touching one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around his, and Owen felt tears spring to his eyes. What should we name him? They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy, but suddenly Nora knew exactly what felt right. "Matthew," she said, It means gift of God because that is what He is, a gift. A sign that broken things can be made whole, that new life can come from pain. Matthew Dalton, Owen said, testing it out. He looked at Nora, his wife, the mother of his child, this woman who had walked into his life just over 2 years ago carrying nothing but a satchel and a world of hurt. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for trusting me, for building this life with me, for giving me this gift." Nora reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Thank you for putting me back together, for showing me what I was worth, for loving me when I had forgotten how to love myself." The early days with Matthew were exhausting but joyful. Owen helped in the night when the baby cried, walking the floor with his son while Nora rested. He changed diapers without complaint, sang off key lullabies, and stared at his child with a wonder that never seemed to fade. The ranch continued to prosper. They hired more men, expanded the herd, and began breeding horses as well as cattle. Nora proved to have a good head for business, keeping meticulous records and suggesting improvements that increased their profit margins. In 1876, their daughter was born, a tiny girl with Nora's auburn hair and Owen's dark eyes. They named her Sarah, and if possible, Owen fell even more in love with his wife seeing her with their daughter. Nora was a wonderful mother, patient and loving, giving her children all the tenderness she had been denied as a wife in her first marriage. The years passed in a blur of growth and change. Matthew grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with the horses. Sarah was wild and free, racing across the ranch with scraped knees and a ready laugh. In 1878, they had another son, Samuel, who was quieter than his siblings but had a gift with animals that was almost uncanny. Through it all, Nora and Owen's love only deepened. They had their disagreements, of course, moments of tension and frustration that come with any marriage and the stress of running a ranch. But they had learned to talk through their problems, to listen to each other, to always come back to the love that had brought them together. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1883, Owen took Nora back to the hilltop where he had first proposed. The children were with Mrs. Pritchard in town, giving them a rare day alone together. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Owen asked as they sat on the same fallen log, now weathered by 10 more years of seasons. "Of course," Nora replied, leaning against his shoulder. "I was so scared. Scared to hope, scared to believe that happiness was possible for someone like me. And now?" Nora was quiet for a moment, thinking about the life they had built together. The ranch that had grown and prospered, the 3 beautiful children sleeping safely in their beds each night, the community they had become part of, the friendships she had formed. The woman she had become, strong and confident and whole. "Now I know that the woman I was when I arrived in Coloma, that broken, frightened person, she was always worthy of love. She just needed someone to show her that. You gave me that gift, Owen. You helped me see my own worth." Owen turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You did the hard work, Nora. I just held up a mirror. The strength was always yours." "We did it together," Nora corrected. "And that is what I love most about us. We are partners in everything." "Partners," Owen agreed, kissing her softly. "For the rest of our lives." As they sat together watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the young woman who had fled Boston with nothing but a satchel and terror in her heart. She thought about the day she had stumbled onto this ranch, desperate and broken, and whispered her pain to a stranger. That stranger had become her husband, her partner, her home. He had kept his promise, helping her put the broken pieces back together. But more than that, he had helped her see that the cracks where she had been broken were not weaknesses but proof of her survival, her strength, her resilience. She was not the same person she had been. She was better, stronger, more whole, and she had built a life beyond anything she had dared to dream. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Owen and Nora rode back to the ranch together, side by side as they had been for 10 years and would be for all the years to come. Below them, lights glowed in the windows of their home where their children waited. Beyond, the land they had worked and loved stretched out in the gathering darkness. Nora thought about how she had once believed she would never be free, never be happy, never be whole. But she had been wrong. With courage, time, and love, anything was possible. Broken things could be mended, wounded hearts could heal, and from the ashes of pain and fear, new life could grow. In 1885, their fourth and final child was born, another girl they named Grace. By then, Matthew was 10 and already showing signs of inheriting his father's skill with horses. Sarah, at 8, was a wild spirit who loved racing across the ranch on her pony. Samuel, at 6, spent his days following the ranch cats and nursing injured birds back to health. The house was always full of noise and laughter, muddy boots and scraped knees, bedtime stories and morning chaos. It was everything Nora had never known she wanted, everything she had been afraid to hope for. Mrs. Pritchard, now quite elderly, often visited, her eyes twinkling as she watched the family Nora had built. "I knew the first moment I saw you that you were special," she told Nora one afternoon as they sat on the porch watching the children play. "You had the look of someone who had survived a storm. I am glad you found your safe harbor." "So am I," Nora replied, bouncing baby Grace on her knee. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. That I get to wake up every morning in a home full of love, with a husband who treats me like I am precious, with children who know nothing but kindness." "You deserve every bit of it," Mrs. Pritchard said firmly. "And you have built something beautiful here, not just for yourself but for this whole community. The way you opened your home to that Chinese family when everyone else turned them away, the school supplies you donate every year, the way you always have a meal ready for anyone who needs it. You have taken your pain and transformed it into compassion. That is a rare gift." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. She had indeed tried to use her experience to help others. When she heard of other women trapped in difficult marriages, she quietly offered assistance, a place to stay, connections to Mrs. Cunningham in Sacramento. She volunteered at the church, taught Sunday school, and made sure her children understood the importance of kindness and respect. As the years passed, the ranch continued to thrive. Matthew, as he grew older, took on more responsibility, working alongside his father and learning the business. Sarah, against all expectations, developed a talent for breeding horses, with an eye for bloodlines that proved invaluable. Samuel became the ranch's unofficial veterinarian, his gentle touch and intuitive understanding of animal behavior making him invaluable during calving season or when a horse took sick. Little Grace grew into a bright, curious child who loved books as much as her mother did. Nora taught her to read early, and they spent countless hours together poring over the small library Owen had built for his wife over the years. In 1890, as they celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary, Nora and Owen took an evening walk through the ranch, as had become their custom. The children were all asleep, Matthew now a young man of 15 watching over his younger siblings. "You ever think about that first day?" Owen asked as they walked hand in hand through the warm September evening. "When you showed up on my porch looking like you might blow away in a strong wind." "Sometimes," Nora admitted, "though that person feels very far away now, like a story I heard about someone else." "You were so brave," Owen said, "so much braver than you knew." "I was terrified," Nora corrected. every moment of every day for months. Terrified he would find me, terrified I would never be free, terrified that I would never be able to trust again. But you did it anyway. That is what bravery is. Nora stopped walking, turning to face her husband. At 40, he had silver threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, and a few more scars from the dangers of ranch work. But to her, he was as handsome as the day she had met him, made more beautiful by the years of love and partnership they had shared. "I could not have done it without you," she said softly. "You gave me a safe place to land. You showed me what real love looked like. You were patient when I needed patience, strong when I needed strength, and gentle always." "You gave me just as much," Owen replied, pulling her close. "Before you came, this was just a ranch. A business. A way to pass the time. You made it a home. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to build something that would last beyond my own lifetime." They stood together in the gathering twilight, wrapped in each other's arms, and Nora felt a profound sense of peace. This was what healing looked like, she thought. Not the absence of scars, but the ability to live fully despite them. Not forgetting the pain, but refusing to let it define you. The turn of the century brought changes to Coloma and the surrounding area. The railroad expanded, bringing new opportunities and challenges. The wild frontier was gradually being tamed, becoming more settled and civilized. But the Dalton Ranch remained a constant, a thriving operation passed down through the family. In 1895, Matthew married a sweet girl from Sacramento named Elizabeth, and they began building a house on the northern section of the ranch. Watching her son become a husband, seeing him treat his wife with the same respect and tenderness Owen had shown her, filled Nora with pride and gratitude. She had broken the cycle, had shown her children what healthy love looked like. Sarah, independent and spirited, declared she was in no hurry to marry, much to the disappointment of several local young men. She was more interested in building the horse breeding program into something that could stand on its own. Owen, proud of his daughter's business acumen, made her a full partner in that aspect of the ranch. Samuel, at 16, had started courting the daughter of the local veterinarian, a quiet girl who shared his love of animals. And Grace, at 10, was already showing signs of her mother's intelligence and her father's steady nature. As Nora watched her children grow and thrive, as she saw the ranch continue to prosper, as she woke each morning next to a man who still looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world, she sometimes thought back to that desperate woman on the stagecoach. She thought about the bruises, both physical and emotional. She thought about the fear that had been her constant companion. She thought about how she had believed she was broken beyond repair, that happiness was something that happened to other people, but she had been wrong. With time, with help, with love, she had not just been repaired. She had been transformed. The broken pieces had been put back together, yes, but in a new configuration that was stronger, more resilient, more beautiful than the original. On a crisp autumn morning in 1900, Nora stood on the porch of the ranch house, a cup of coffee warming her hands. She was 50 years old, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, her face lined with the marks of a life well lived. Behind her, she could hear Owen moving around in the kitchen, starting breakfast as he often did on Sunday mornings to give her a rest. In the distance, she could see Matthew and Elizabeth's house, smoke rising from the chimney. Sarah was already in the barn, working with a new colt. Samuel and his young wife Emma lived in what used to be the foreman's cabin, now expanded and renovated. And Grace was still asleep upstairs, a teenager now with her own dreams and ambitions. "Coffee for your thoughts," Owen said, stepping out onto the porch and handing her a fresh cup. Nora smiled, leaning into his side as his arm came around her shoulders, a gesture as familiar and comfortable as breathing. "I was just thinking about how far we have come, about how much has changed since that day I walked up this road with nothing but a satchel and hope." "Best day of my life," Owen said simply. "The day you walked into it." "You always say that," Nora teased gently, "because it is always true." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Every morning I wake up grateful. Grateful you were brave enough to run, grateful you ended up here, grateful you gave me a chance." "I am the grateful one," Nora insisted. "You saved me, Owen." "No," Owen said firmly, a conversation they had had many times over the years but one that never seemed to get old. "You saved yourself. I just provided a safe place for you to do it." Nora thought about that, about the truth in his words. She had done the hard work of healing, of learning to trust again, of rebuilding herself from the inside out. But she also knew she could not have done it alone, that Owen's steady presence, his patient love, his unwavering belief in her worth had been the foundation on which she had reconstructed her life. "Then we saved each other," she said finally, "because I know I made your life better too." "You made my life everything," Owen replied. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun rise over the ranch they had built together. In the distance, cattle lowed, horses whinnied, and the sounds of the ranch waking up filled the air. It was the soundtrack of their life, as familiar as their own heartbeats. "You ever regret it?" Nora asked suddenly. "Marrying someone like me, someone with so much baggage, so much damage?" Owen turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders, his dark eyes serious. "Never. Not for one single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Nora Dalton. Your past is part of what made you who you are, and who you are is extraordinary." Nora felt the familiar sting of happy tears. Even after all these years, his words still had the power to move her. "I love you," she said simply. "More than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Owen replied, kissing her softly. "Always have, always will." As they stood on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms and surrounded by the life they had built together, Nora thought about that moment years ago when she had whispered her brokenness to this man. He had promised to help put her back together, and he had kept that promise every single day since. But more than that, he had helped her see that being broken was not the end of her story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, healing, and possibility. The scars remained, subtle reminders of where she had been, but they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her story, proof that she had survived, that she had overcome, that she had thrived. Matthew's first child, a son they named Owen after his grandfather, was born in 1901. Holding her grandson for the first time, seeing 3 generations of Daltons gathered in one room, Nora felt a sense of completion. She had not just survived her past, she had built a future. A legacy of love and respect and kindness that would continue long after she was gone. As the years continued to pass, Nora and Owen settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long marriage. They knew each other's habits and quirks, could communicate with a glance, finished each other's sentences. The passion of their early years had matured into something deeper, steadier, but no less profound. They faced challenges, as all families do. A drought in 1903 that tested their resources and resilience. Sarah's heartbreak, when a man she had finally allowed herself to love, proved unworthy of her trust. Samuel's illness that winter of 1905 that had them both up nights, praying and keeping vigil until the fever finally broke. Grace's struggle to find her place in the world, wanting to attend university but torn about leaving the ranch. Through it all, they faced each challenge together, their partnership as strong as ever. Owen's steady presence and Nora's quiet strength proved to be a formidable combination, and they weathered each storm that came their way. In 1908, Sarah finally married, choosing a schoolteacher from Sacramento who shared her independent spirit and respected her ambitions. Grace left for the University of California, tearful but excited, determined to study literature. Samuel and Emma welcomed their third child, a daughter, and Matthew and Elizabeth continued to build their family and their portion of the ranch. Nora and Owen, now in their late 50s and 60s respectively, began to step back slightly from the day-to-day operations of the ranch. Matthew was more than capable of running things, with Sarah managing the horse breeding program and Samuel overseeing the livestock health. This gave Nora and Owen more time together, time they treasured. They took trips, something they had never been able to do when the children were young, and the ranch demanded constant attention. They traveled to San Francisco, where Nora saw the ocean for the first time and laughed with pure joy as the waves crashed against her feet. They visited the Yosemite Valley, standing in awe before the massive granite cliffs and thundering waterfalls. But they always returned to the ranch, to the home they had built together, to the family that surrounded them. This was where they belonged, where their roots had grown deep and strong. On their 35th wedding anniversary in 1908, their children and grandchildren threw them a party. The ranch house was full to bursting with family and friends, with laughter and music and the warmth of community. As Nora looked around at all the faces she loved, at the life she and Owen had created together, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that evening, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, Owen and Nora sat together on the porch swing he had built for her years ago. The familiar creak of the chains was soothing, the rhythm of their movement together natural and easy. 35 years, Owen mused. Seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once. I know what you mean, Nora replied, her head resting on his shoulder. Sometimes I can hardly remember the woman I was before I met you, and other times I can still feel her fear as clearly as if it were yesterday. Does it still bother you? The memories? Nora considered the question carefully. They are there, she said finally. They always will be, but they do not have power over me anymore. They are just memories, things that happened to a person I used to be. They shaped me, but they do not define me. I am proud of you, Owen said softly, for everything you have overcome, everything you have built, everything you are. I am proud of us, Nora corrected, for building this life together, for staying true to each other through everything, for showing our children what real love looks like. They sat in comfortable silence, the night air cool and sweet around them. In the distance, an owl hooted, and somewhere a coyote called to the moon. The sounds of the ranch at night, as familiar as their own breathing. You remember what you said to me that first night? Nora asked. When I told you I was broken inside. I said I would help put you back together, Owen replied. You did more than that, Nora said, sitting up to look at him. You helped me become someone new, someone stronger than I ever could have been if I had not been broken first. You taught me that broken things, when they are put back together with love and care, can be more beautiful than they ever were before. Owen cupped her face in his weathered hands, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. You taught me that too. You taught me about courage and resilience and the incredible strength of the human spirit. You made me a better man, Nora, a better person. They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held 35 years of love and partnership and shared history. When they parted, both had tears in their eyes, but they were happy tears, grateful tears. Here is to the next 35 years, Owen said with a smile. Here is to every day we have left, Nora replied. However many or few. As long as we are together, that is enough. They continued to sit on the porch long into the night, wrapped in each other's arms and in the comfortable silence of a love that had been tested by time and found unbreakable. Above them, the stars wheeled across the vast California sky, eternal and unchanging. Around them, the ranch slept, the land they had worked and loved and called home. And in that moment, Nora felt the truth of her life settle into her bones. She had started as a broken woman running from her past, carrying nothing but fear and a desperate hope for something better. She had found that something better in the form of a rancher with kind eyes and a patient heart, a man who had seen past her wounds to the person she could become. Together they had built something beautiful. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and lasting and full of love. They had created a family, a legacy, a home. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. They had grown together, changed together, loved each other through it all. The broken pieces had been put back together, yes, but into something entirely new. Something stronger, more resilient, more beautiful than before. The cracks where she had broken were still visible if you knew where to look, but they were filled with gold now, with love and healing and hope. They were proof of survival, of transformation, of the incredible human capacity for renewal. As Nora sat with her husband beneath the stars, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built together, she knew with absolute certainty that this was what happiness looked like. Not the absence of pain or struggle, but the presence of love. Not perfection, but partnership. Not erasure of the past, but transcendence of it. She had whispered her brokenness to a stranger on a dusty ranch porch all those years ago. He had promised to help put her back together. And he had kept that promise every single day in ways both big and small. But more importantly, he had helped her learn to put herself back together, to find her own strength, to believe in her own worth. And in doing so, they had created something neither of them could have built alone. A love story for the ages, played out against the backdrop of the Wild West, a testament to the healing power of patience, kindness, and unwavering devotion. The night deepened around them, but they remained on the porch, reluctant to let the moment end. Finally, as the moon began to set and the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky, they went inside, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held together, as they always had and always would. The door closed softly behind them, shutting out the night and enclosing them in the warmth and safety of the home they had made, the life they had built, the love that would endure long after they were both gone, living on in their children and grandchildren and all the lives they had touched along the way.